call this meeting to order. On October 4th, 2018, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health adopted a motion to create a subcommittee to study sport-related concussions in Canada. Since November 21st, 2018, the subcommittee has heard from a variety of witnesses from different perspectives: amateur and professional athletes, parents, researchers, doctors, equipment manufacturers, sports organizations, the entire sports family, because we love sport and we want to grow sport. Today, the committee will hear from NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman in the final day of testimony in this study. I want to thank Commissioner Bettman and Deputy Commissioner Daly for appearing today. We know it's a busy time for the NHL with the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs just getting started. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us here today. Congratulations on your tenure as NHL Commissioner. As I understand, you were named Commissioner in 1993. It was the first time the National Hockey League had a commissioner. Since then, the league has grown into new markets and strengthened traditional markets in Canada and the U.S. Our vision is not too dissimilar. We want to grow sport through more participation. The responsible way to do that is by making our sports safer. Commissioner Bettman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, honorable members. I appreciate your invitation to be here to discuss the important matter of concussion in sports. Recognizing that my time for remarks is limited, the NHL is also providing a written submission to the subcommittee today that contains further details with regard to the matters that I'm about to discuss. For over 26 years, I've had the privilege of serving as Commissioner of the National Hockey League. NHL hockey, as you all know, is played in an enclosed environment at high speeds by players of different heights, weights, and skills. By its very nature, professional hockey is a collision sport, and contact is sometimes unavoidable. In some circumstances, injuries, including concussions, may inevitably occur. Consequently, during my tenure as Commissioner, the health and safety of NHL players has been a top priority for the league, its member clubs, and the Players Association. In fact, the NHL has pioneered a number of player safety initiatives that have served as a model for other sports entities. For example, since 1977, the NHL and the NHLPA have had mandatory league-wide neuropsychological baseline testing as part of its concussion program. This was the first program of its kind in professional sports. The NHL was also the first professional sports league in any sport to adopt league-wide electronic medical record systems for tracking player injuries, and the first to create a Department of Player Safety, which, among other things, monitors games and assesses player compliance with NHL playing rules. Over the years, we have built on this work by remaining current with medical and scientific developments regarding concussions and have fostered a culture in our sport in which players, teams, and their respective medical staffs work cooperatively to manage these injuries. Today, I will describe for you the current landscape in the NHL related to concussion management. For additional specifics, please refer to our written submission. The NHL has already shared extensive information regarding this topic with representatives of all levels of hockey. We have organized collaborative summits. They have been organized, sponsored, and hosted by the NHL, and we have conducted them in 2018 and 2019. In addition, the NHL has participated in conferences with other so-called collision sports leagues and governing bodies from all over the world in 2017 and 2018, which were organized as forums to share best practices regarding concussion management and to align on data collection and research to aid in that effort. For obvious reasons, not all initiatives undertaken at the NHL level will be applicable or appropriate at other levels of hockey or for other sports. Nevertheless, I am pleased to share our practices and approach and to provide you with information that I hope may help the subcommittee fulfill its mandate. The NHL's policies and procedures relating to head injuries are set forth in a comprehensive concussion protocol that was first codified in 2010 and has been updated regularly. The concussion protocol addresses the provisions of education to players, on-ice officials, athletic therapists and trainers, and club medical staff. It requires baseline testing for all players. It sets forth the procedures surrounding the identification and evaluation of possible concussions, and it establishes the process for diagnosis, management, and return to play following a concussion. Our clubs are committed to compliance with the protocol and actively support and follow it. The first step under the concussion protocol is ensuring that adequate efforts are being made to identify potential concussions. To that end, the protocol includes a list of, quote, visible signs, close quote, of potential concussions and authorizes and directs various parties to remove a player from play if one or more of these visible signs are detected. For example, there are 2 league-appointed individuals who watch each NHL game with the sole job of identifying players who exhibit visible signs of possible concussion, a central league spotter and an in-arena league spotter. The protocol also tasks each club with the responsibility to identify and remove players who exhibit visible signs for an acute evaluation for possible concussion. On-ice officials are also instructed to remove players for evaluation if they observe players who exhibit visible signs of possible concussion. The ultimate result of our protocol, as designed and executed, is a multi-layered system that is intended to ensure the removal of players from the game for evaluation as soon as possible. Ultimately, all concussion diagnosis must be made through an individualized assessment drawing on the clinical expertise of club medical staff, following administration of a standardized concussion assessment tool that reflects the latest consensus in the international community of concussion experts. While the NHL is fortunate to rely on highly qualified medical professionals and benefits from the use of a standardized concussion assessment tool, input from the player remains a critical factor in concussion evaluation and diagnosis. To this end, players are provided with extensive education by the NHL and the NHLPA on the identification of systems and the importance of promptly and accurately alerting club medical personnel if they are experiencing any symptoms of possible concussion. Once a player has been diagnosed with a concussion, the protocol establishes specific criteria that must be met before a club physician can clear a player to return to play. 1. We require that there be a complete recovery of concussion-related symptoms at rest. 2. That there be no emergence of concussion-related symptoms at exertion levels that are required for competitive play, and that a graded return to play progression be completed. And 3, that the player be judged to have returned to his neurological baseline by the club physician and by a neurocognitive baseline following an evaluation by a club consulting neuropsychologist. The protocol does not permit a player who has been diagnosed with a concussion to return to practice or a game on the same day that the event occurred, irrespective of how quickly his symptoms resolve. This reflects the current approach set forth in the Consensus Statement on Concussion in Sports as promulgated at the most recent International Conference on Concussion in Sport, which was held in Berlin in 2016. The NHL's baseline testing program plays a critical role in the return to play decision and is worth highlighting here. Under the protocol, each player undergoes preseason neuropsychological testing to establish a baseline score, which is compared to a player's score on an identical battery of tests administered during the player's recovery process. If a player has not returned to his cognitive baseline, he will not be cleared to return to play under the protocol. Turning next to building awareness and providing education, which is a central component of our protocol, it is a required element of the protocol that education is provided to all relevant members of the NHL community on the identification, diagnosis, and management of concussions, and emphasizes the importance of taking this injury seriously. As others have noted, hockey players are fiercely competitive and often instinctively want to return to play as soon as possible, regardless of whether they have fully recovered from injury. Accordingly, the NHL and the NHLPA have developed a number of educational initiatives to inform players about the common signs and symptoms of a possible concussion, the importance of reporting symptoms to medical experts, what to expect once a player is diagnosed with a concussion, what players can do to assist in their recovery from a concussion, and the scientific debate regarding the possibility of long-term consequences of concussion. Our educational program to players is robust and starts on the first morning of training camp each season, where clubs are required to begin with a meeting where players and club medical personnel watch and discuss an educational video on concussions. The protocol's education program continues at multiple intervals throughout the season and is provided to players and, in some cases, their families, using many mediums such as posters, videos, direct presentations, and brochures. Our education efforts are not limited to the players. We provide common messaging on our protocol to all important stakeholders at each club and to the NHL's on-ice officials. Club managements, coaches, and on-ice officials all watch the same video that the players view at the beginning of training camp. In addition, NHL on-ice officials receive in-person education and training on the protocol prior to each season, and the league provides regular concussion program updates and education to general managers, coaches, and the NHL Board of Governors. With regard to educating the broader hockey community outside of the NHL, our league has played a leadership role in organizing, sponsoring, and hosting hockey safety summits in each of 2018 and 2019, with representation from and participation by decision makers at all levels of amateur, collegiate, and professional hockey. These summits have facilitated the important exchange of information regarding best practices and key learnings from each group on safety-related initiatives, including concussion-related matters. As already noted, the NHL has also participated in international collision sports conferences in each of 2017 and 18, and we will be the host of the 2019 conference. The 2017 conference focused on each league's implementation of the Berlin Consensus Statement. In addition, the NHL and the NHLPA are currently producing a concussion education video that is being specifically crafted for the larger hockey community, which we anticipate distributing later this year. In past years, the NHL and the NHLPA have contributed to a number of other videos illustrating the potential dangers of concussion and recommending the best ways to play the game of hockey safely. And in those efforts, we have worked with two individuals who have already testified before this committee, Dr. Charles Tater and Eric Lindros. The NHL has also contributed to the scientific literature addressing concussions through numerous articles published by expert members of the NHL-NHLPA Concussion Subcommittee. I would also like to highlight several of the concrete steps the NHL and the NHLPA have adopted to make NHL hockey safer for our players. The NHL and the NHLPA have taken a collaborative and proactive approach to achieve this critical goal and will continue to do so moving forward. With regard to our playing rules, the NHL and the NHLPA have worked diligently to adopt changes to the game that reduce the incidence of concussion while working to preserve the essential physical nature of our sport. One such rule that the NHL and the NHLPA have adopted is Rule 48, which prohibits all hits to an opponent's head where the head was the main point of contact and such contact was avoidable. Since implementing Rule 48, there has been a demonstrable drop in the percentage of concussions resulting from body checks involving head contact. There are some individuals who have called for a blanket rule prohibiting all hits that result in head contact, whether intentional or accidental, including some who have testified before this subcommittee. Such a rule is very easy to propose. It is difficult, if not impossible, to implement and apply in practice. The prevailing view of stakeholders associated with rules development in the NHL, including the NHLPA, with whom any such rule would need to be negotiated and agreed to, is that it would not be possible to consistently and fairly enforce a rule that prohibits head contact of any kind or nature if the NHL is to be maintained as a physical contact sport. That view has informed our approach, and while we will continue to monitor and evaluate this important issue as we do with respect to all issues concerning player health and safety, we believe that the current iteration of Rule 48 strikes the correct balance for NHL hockey. Enforcement of playing rules through supplemental discipline further promotes player safety and represents an important deterrent to player conduct that is inconsistent with the physical contact permitted in NHL hockey. The NHL Department of Player Safety monitors every game and assesses every hit to ensure adherence with the league's standards for safety. When those standards are violated, the department issues supplemental discipline, which can include significant player suspensions and/or fines. Before I wrap up, I would like to address the issue of fighting, which has been brought up before this subcommittee and has been a topic of public debate for decades and well before I became commissioner. Fights in the modern game are at an all-time low. 85% of regular season games are fight-free, which is the highest percentage of fight-free games since the 1964-65 season. Having said that, many involved in our game, including numerous players and the NHLPA, continue to adhere to the belief that fighting, while penalized, or more specifically, the threat of fighting, actually deters and reduces the incidence of other types of dangerous and potentially injurious play. Moreover, many current and former NHL players have stated that the threat of fights helps protect the most highly skilled players from being inappropriately targeted. With respect to concerns about fighting and concussions specifically, it is worth noting that relatively few concussions result from fighting. For example, based on video analysis of our games, there have been an average of 2.6 diagnosed concussions per season over the last 5 seasons that were arguably caused by a player's participation in a fight with an opponent. Mr. Chair, I know that your subcommittee has focused on concussions among younger athletes in youth hockey. Through our research, educational videos, and hockey summits, the NHL is committed to sharing best practices with all hockey organizations. But I understand and agree that not everything done at the NHL level should apply to younger, non-professional players. Our players like the way the NHL game is played and understand the implications of playing a physical contact sport at the highest professional level in the world. Hockey organizations at each level of the sport must make appropriate rulemaking decisions for themselves and their constituents, and as I've mentioned, we firmly believe our rules are appropriate at the NHL level. In conclusion, the NHL and the NHLPA have worked collaboratively to change the culture of the game in a positive way. On a nightly basis, we see examples of players making the extra effort to avoid dangerous plays and unnecessary contact. This cultural shift in the game has resulted from an increased awareness of the seriousness of concussions, appropriate diagnosis and management of concussions, and greater player willingness to report symptoms and seek out medical care. The NHL and its member clubs, together with the NHLPA, will continue to work together to address all aspects of game safety while remaining committed to preserving the core elements of our sport. At the same time, we will continue our work with hockey organizations at all levels to assist with their best practices and awareness campaigns. Mr. Chair, I want to thank you and the honorable members for your time, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Bettman, for your testimony. We'll now move to members' questions. We will be starting with the Liberals, and Mr. Fisher, I believe you're first for 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, folks. Appreciate Mr. Bettman, Commissioner Bettman, for being here, and Deputy Commissioner Mr. Daly, thank you very much for being here. Our last witnesses in a long time. Mr. Bettman, you'll probably recall U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal wrote a letter to you regarding the link between concussions and CTE. Now, he cited the deaths of NHL players Bugard, Fleming, Probert, Martin, Montador, all whose brains contain strong evidence of CTE. When you responded, your letter said that the science regarding CTE and the link to the concussion suffered by the players that Senator Blumenthal referenced, and I'll quote, remains nascent, particularly with the respect to what causes CTE and whether it can be diagnosed by specific clinical symptoms. So it appears that the evidence now is overwhelming, showing a link between concussions in hockey and other sports. What is your belief now, and what is the league's position these days on whether there's a link between CTE and concussions in hockey?
Question, but I'm not sure that the premise that the link is clear now is one that the scientific and medical community has embraced. I am not a physician. I am not a scientist. My views are informed by experts in the field. And in fact, if you referred to the Berlin Consensus Statement, the systematic review of the literature published in support of it, it explained that, quote, the causes of mental health and cognitive problems in former athletes like the general population are broad and diverse, including genetics, life stress, general medical problems, e.g. hypertension, diabetes, and heart disease, chronic body pain, substance abuse, and neurological conditions and disease, e.g. cerebral vascular disease, and neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and ALS. Accordingly, the systematic review concludes that the extent to which repetitive neurotrauma contributes to these issues is poorly understood and requires further study. In addition, the consensus statement, which was subscribed to by 36 practitioners in the field, again has continued to say that there has yet to be the ability to draw the conclusion that one will lead to the other. And in fact, Dr. Cantu, who I believe was stated under oath, he is the co-founder of the Concussion Legacy Foundation with Mr. Nowinski, who I believe was here, said under oath, we don't know the incidence or prevalence of CTE currently. We don't know the incidence or prevalence of CTE within NHL hockey. We don't know what the exposure levels of head impacts are for hockey. And I don't have any knowledge to say that 3 concussions put you at substantial risk over the course of a career. And I don't have the knowledge to know what the risks are for 15 years of hockey. In short, I don't believe there has been, based on everything I've been told, and if anybody has information to the contrary, we'd be happy to hear it. Other than some anecdotal evidence, there has not been that conclusive link.
So thank you for that. The NFL feels there's a link. Now, I know you've said that NFL football is not the same as NHL hockey, and I get that, but they're both very fast, high-energy sports.
There are 2 aspects to that. One, I'm not sure what the NFL's position is. A vice president who is neither a doctor or a scientist made that comment, and I believe a week or so later, at least 1 or 2 NFL owners disputed that statement. So I don't know what the NFL's position is. Dr. Ann McKee, who also works with the Boston University group, told me in my office that hockey and football are not the same. We don't have the repetitive head contact and impact that some of the other sports do. And so while we understand that this is an issue that needs to be constantly followed and focused on, there have not been conclusive determinations.
Okay. Going to your concussion protocol for a second, you talked about visible signs of distress. So now I'm not sure if this is up to date, but the concussion protocol doesn't require the removal of a player who is slow to get up from a hit to the head from a goalpost, the boards, the glass, or even another player's elbow. Has that been changed?
I believe that is a non-mandatory, but it is one that may cause you to say if you're looking for other visible signs and you do it. So it doesn't mean you automatically get to stay in. The trainer and medical staff may yet conclude that it's appropriate to have a player come in and be evaluated. Our goal is to get players who may be at risk from concussion off the ice as quickly as possible and evaluated.
I appreciate that clarification.
It actually has been changed as well. It's been updated. Contact with the end boards or glass and slow to get up is a mandatory removal.
Gotcha. Thank you. So we think about the trickle-down effect, and we think about NHL up here. A lot of young kids would emulate the things that they see in the NHL. Do you think that the NHL has a responsibility to boys and girls playing the game?
I believe that we can use our visibility and our platforms to make sure that young people are taking from our game the right messages. What is done at and is appropriate at the NHL level may not be appropriate at the youth level, but there are things that go on in our game that send the right message. For example, with respect to dangerous hits, making sure that people at all levels of the game need to avoid them if at all possible. With respect to acknowledging if you're not feeling well, if you think you have an injury, particularly a concussion, not trying to play through it to be tough, but understanding, and that's something our culture for our players has changed over the years with the education and with the concussion protocol, because we've had buy-in from the players and the Players Association to make sure the culture of the game is one where if you're not right, you're willing to acknowledge it and get help, and that is something that permeates it, and you see it in our games on a regular basis. There will be coaches who tell players to leave the bench and go and be evaluated. You will see players telling trainers that other players should be looked at, and that's all part of now acknowledging that in our game, if you're injured, it's okay to acknowledge it and get help. Not only okay, it's important.
Thank you, Commissioner. That moves us over to the Conservatives now, and Dr. Kitchen, you're on for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can I just add one more thing to the...
When you come back,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. It's much appreciated. And
Thank you.
As you've indicated, a lot of what we're talking about here is not only for professional hockey, but also for sport in general, and not just hockey. So I appreciate your comments and some of your information that you've provided for us. And one of the things that we've heard a lot about is education. And it's great to see that you've got that base there on that education. It's great to see that you put in baseline scores and then you test as appropriate. The problem with some of these testing procedures is that if you continually do the same tests, you actually learn from repeating those same tests. Do you look at that, and do you discuss that with your medical personnel?
Two things. One, with respect to the message we send to young people, which is responsive to both questions, the concussion video we are currently making, which will have widespread distribution, star NHL players will be talking to young players and telling them the importance of being truthful when they're talking to trainers and physicians about their current medical state. And the testing that we use has been updated. It gets changed periodically. I think we're in the fifth, we're on what's called the SCAT-5, Sport Concussion Acute Treatment Tool, treatment tool. We're the generation 5 of it.
Right.
So
and we're aware of the SCAT-5. And
yes.
Now, you talk about part of the things you mentioned in your presentation was talking about data collection. And that's one of the things that we've heard throughout from a lot of organizations throughout this committee is the lack of data collection that's out there. And it's great to hear that you've got that. I'm wondering if you are in a position where you could share that data that you've collected on the types of hits and any information that you've had, not without names obviously, but with actually what that data is, that maybe share that with the committee as we go forward.
To the extent that we are legally permitted to do it, we're happy to do it. There are a variety of rules, including HIPAA in the United States. But having said that, I think the data collection point is particularly important on medical conditions for young people. So to the extent that at lower levels, grassroots hockey and the other levels of hockey being played in leagues, if there was more data collection, we would be able to collectively, as we bring everybody together periodically, enable us to make sure that we are gathering as much information as possible to learn as much about what actually happens in the sport that may or may not cause injuries. And we are working to build a platform that will allow accessibility for all levels of hockey to put in that information. And we will make that available once it's built.
Thank you. On the education issue, you talked about feedback. And I'm wondering, can you provide, or do you get feedback from your players? You provide them with the education. You teach them at the beginning of the season, you educate them, et cetera, and you go through your protocol to do that. What's the feedback you've got from your players on how valuable they see it, on whether they see it of useful to what they're learning, or do they just say, okay, thanks, and move on?
No, I anecdotally, based on conversations that we have with players, and we interact with players on a regular basis, they understand the value and importance of it. In a particular case, you'll have a player who just doesn't want to get pulled from a game, but in the final analysis, they recognize the importance. They all buy into it. The Players Association has bought into it, and there is as I said before, a change in the culture with respect to the need to be candid and accurate and willing to be evaluated when you have a visible sign of concussion and you need to be treated appropriately. And you can see it now across the league in terms of the compliance with the program.
I've been involved with minor hockey since my kids were little and since I was in university. And I've watched the progressions that's happened over the years in coaching, not only that 4-year-old who at 4 is saying to himself he wants to be an NHL superstar and he wants to be Tuukka Rask in goal or whoever it may be. And you watch that progress, and you watch that throughout Pee Wee, and you watch that through midget, and you watch that through junior, and everybody's going to the NHL, and everyone's going to be that superstar. So a lot of things have changed, not only for them, but we've seen that in the game. The game's become faster and quicker. You've been involved with the league for, as you've said, for 26 years. What changes have you seen specifically on when we're dealing with head injuries, and what do you see for the next 26 years?
That's a terrific question. I've seen a variety of changes. First, the medicine and knowledge about injuries, particularly concussions, is vastly different now than when I first took over. People didn't have the same knowledge. Concussions didn't get the same level of attention. One of the reasons that I decided in 1997 to be the first sports league to create a working study group of players of the league, of trainers, of doctors, to try and get everybody focused together to make sure that what we were doing on a unified basis would maximize the amount of knowledge that we could have and share within the NHL, and to make sure there was uniformity of treatment. So our ability to understand concussions and treat them is much better. That has been transferred to the players, as we've discussed with education. But what's also happened, for a variety of other reasons, there's more emphasis now in the game on skill. And so you see far fewer teams who have hardly any players that are really not skilled hockey players and that had other skills that were separate and apart from the game, fighters, right? And so at the end of the day, I think what we're seeing is a healthier game. players more focused on player safety, and a game that is more entertaining and more competitive because the players are more skillful.
Thank you, Dr. Kitchen. We're moving over to the NDP now, and Ms. Hardcastle for 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Bettman. I just want to continue on this theme of, you've been there for 26 years. You've seen some changes in the game. We heard you comment that you're still waiting for more evidence, obviously more decisive evidence about the link between concussions and some of the other symptoms that you experience in CTE. So that's evolving. But you mentioned about implementing Rule 48. So I know that somewhere there was the interest and the engagement in current information to say that we want to do something to reduce the percentage of concussions. And this has proven successful, right? So maybe you can tell me a little bit about how you evolved to that point and where you see this being a progressive reality in reducing concussions. So there's obviously more that's going to have to be done. Let me just front load my question, and then I'll give you the rest of my time if I may. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the concussions. And we understand now, obviously, with Rule 48, dangerous plays. What's the role of officiating in all of this when we change the game and keep core elements? I found that also intriguing when you talked about keeping the core elements in the game, but we have seen the game change. We've veered away from fighters to skill. So maybe just because that's part of what this subcommittee does is moving forward. What do you see in, should we, rules that just have automatic maximum penalties for certain types of plays? How do you see us moving forward?
That's a great question with a lot of pieces. So
yeah, so you have the rest of my time until Mr. Chair cuts you off. You go for it.
5 minutes?
Yep.
Okay, you'll give me a little bit of a warning before we get to the end. Your question about the officials, as I indicated in my statement, we educate the officials to, among other things, look for visible signs of concussion, because an official can actually cause the removal of a player from the game if he doesn't like what he sees. And I think that's an important buy-in in terms of what takes place, because they're on the ice and they may conceivably have the best view of what happened. The officials are charged with enforcing the rules. They are regularly instructed on rule compliance. They are given coaching videos on a regular basis in terms of how the game should be called, what's legal and what isn't legal. When we talk about the essential elements of the game, body checking, physical contact is something that's part of the game, has been forever. And that's something that makes the game exciting, appealing, entertaining, and it's something that our players think is an important element of the game as well. What we learned is whether or not it's ultimately concluded that a concussion leads to something else down the road, whether it's 1 concussion or 20 concussions, we can all agree it's better if players are not concussed. There's no question about that. Rule 48 has reduced, I believe, the incidence of concussions from head hits from 61% to 40%. So there has been a dramatic decline in the percentage of concussions caused by contact with the head. We've eliminated, there are rules against hitting from behind, there's rules against elbowing, there's rules against cross-checking and high sticking. It's all part of a pattern of trying to keep the game as safe as possible. We've also changed equipment, reduced the size of shoulder pads, of elbow pads. We've softened the environment to get rid of tempered glass and replace it with plexiglass. We've required players, with the agreement of the Players Association on all rule changes, to put on visors. We do a video analysis of injuries, including concussions, every year to see what's causing injuries and what are the adjustments that have to be made, because it's too easy to make blanket statements about changing a rule when, in fact, the rule that you're changing may not be addressing where the injuries are being caused. The educational videos, and as importantly, we have the Department of Player Safety, which is evaluating every hit. And when there's a hit that is not appropriate, that transcends the rule, players get suspended for sometimes long periods of time, costing them potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. All of this is part of a mosaic, if you will, that gets everybody, the constituents, to buy in and creates a framework and a culture that encourages safer play in a game that is inherently physical. How am I doing, Mr. Chairman, on
A
time?
minute and a half.
Just, you've mentioned this before, something about blanket statements. Do you mean blanket statements about hits to the head?
Yes, like there's always been a discussion, for example, there should be no head contact, and there are other leagues that at a lower level that have such a rule, which is inconsistently enforced, and there are still head hits. What we're trying to do is, at the NHL level, strike a balance that we do with the players. This is something that the players feel very strongly about, that we strike a balance to maintain the physicality of the game and reduce to the extent possible head contact. But for example, and I'll give you an absurd example, players, as I indicated, different heights, different weights, different skills. If you eliminate all head contact, every time a taller player, which most players would check me, there would have to be head contact, which meant that if that would result in a penalty every time, there'd be no more body checking.
We are going to be moving over to the Liberals again, and Madame Fortier for 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here today, and I really appreciate that we're having this conversation. Mr. Bettman, I really appreciate what you're saying, and that you are taking it seriously, and you're committed to setting a good example to our children. And I also understand, as a mother of 3 kids, because they are in sport too, that it is something that you're looking. But I watched last night's game, and there was a player that punched another player in the head. And I understand today that no discipline will be given to that player. So I'm trying to understand also the balance between when is it a good hit or a bad hit. And I was wondering if you could explain that to me.
That play should have been penalized. Sometimes things are missed on the ice, which is unfortunate. Our officials have a very difficult job. They must have the most difficult job in all of sports. When a penalty is missed, it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of a suspension, but the player was warned by the Department of Player Safety that that conduct is unacceptable, and if it is repeated, he should look forward to a suspension.
And also, just to try to understand all of that, those sanctions or suspensions, are we going to work, are you going to work on making it clear that this is unacceptable? And if so, what could be done to encourage the fact that this should be done?
Well, actually, and I should have mentioned it before when I was talking about the Department of Player Safety, one of the things that the Department of Player Safety has been charged with is every time they make a decision on supplemental discipline, they make a video which is posted on the NHL's website, so you can see exactly what the act was, why it was punished, and the reason that a particular punishment was administered, particularly in the case of a repeat offender where the suspensions or the punishment gets longer. So we think that those videos are very instructional. And occasionally, when we don't suspend on a controversial play, they make a video explaining why they didn't suspend. So that's something we think is very important to educate everybody.
And again, trying to understand moving forward how we can change that culture or encourage, especially the youth that want to get to that, being able to be an NHL players, girls or boys, of course. How do we continue moving forward to make it safer?
What we need to do is continue to educate, to continue to show how the game should be played and how it's played at each age. You know, as we look at youth hockey, the age at which hitting checking is allowed has been moved up. Getting players to play the right way, not to hit from behind, making sure that they keep their elbows down, making sure that there isn't stick work that's not acceptable. These are the things that we do with videos. And then the medical aspects are equally important. Coaches at all levels of hockey need to have appropriate training. Parents need to have appropriate training, what to look for their children. And to the extent our videos and our messaging can help with that. Going back to your other question, one thing that tends to get overlooked is in the course of the season, there are probably 50,000 man games played. The number of instances where a player does something inappropriate is really a tiny fraction. That doesn't make it okay or acceptable, but that doesn't define the game, because overwhelmingly, our game is played by the rules and appropriately. It's unfortunate that the few inappropriate instances get the most attention. But in the final analysis...
And I have another question.
Yes,
so
let me finish this, and then I'll be happy to take it. We work with Hockey Canada. We work with USA Hockey. We work with the International Ice Hockey Federation. Our goal is to continue to educate players at all levels, because as with most things, education is the key.
And do you continue, by any chance, to have a relationship with former players or current ones that are injured? And how do you support the families? Because it's not just the player. The families are affected in the communities.
Well,
how does that...
First of all, the concussion protocol and the education is available and made available to families when a player has a concussion, so that the whole family structure can understand what's going on. We have counseling programs that are available. Our substance abuse and behavioral health programs are available to former players that are in need. We also have a post-career training program that we do with the Alumni Association, which we help pay for, to make sure that the transition to a different life is made easier. And so we use our resources to do all of those things, and the Players Association works with us. We have an emergency assistance fund for former players who run into financial difficulties. As I said, we work with the Alumni Association. We have increased voluntarily with the Players Association the pension for retired players, particularly the early pension, which was less generous than the one we now provide.
So those supports are in place,
absolutely.
And you continue. And are there any challenges or any asks coming from those families or former players or current ones that are not addressed that we should know
try
about?
to address them all. Sometimes we get requests for help, and the player in question isn't interested in our help. But our resources, we view ourselves as a family, and while, we'll put aside, and nobody's gotten to it yet, the litigations that we've been involved in, at the end of the day, we view ourselves as our family, and our resources are available to the members of our family.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. We are going to be moving to our second round. Now, we've got only about 15 minutes left, so the members are going to have about 3 minutes for questions in this round, and we're going to the Conservatives and Mr. Len Weber.
Actually, Mr. Kitchens. No, I've got a time. Go ahead. Okay. All right.
Yeah, this is speed dating here.
Now you tell me. Okay. All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. I have to say, Mr. Bettman, that your predecessor, Mr. John Ziegler, was a great man. He allowed the Atlanta Flames to come to Calgary, and I have since been a big fan of the Calgary Flames. So I thank him for that.
We appreciate the ownership of the Calgary Flames. We miss Harley Hotchkiss and the other owners that have passed away.
Absolutely.
And your franchise is in good hands with Murray Edwards and his partners.
Great. We just need a new arena.
Yes, you do.
So
but I assume that's for a different committee.
Sure. Yeah. And also our fan favorite, Mr. Johnny Goudreau, is probably one of the smallest players in the league, and I think you need to put a rule in place where if anyone touches him, they should be suspended for many, many days.
Can I get back to you on that?
Sure. Thank you. You mentioned Dr. Charles Tatter, who you work with, and also Eric Lindros.
Dr. Tatter was here on February the 20th to testify here, and he gave us a number of recommendations. And I just wanted to, I looked at one here. It was recommendation to us as a committee or as a government to ensure that there's adequate compensation for injured athletes employed by teams who do not recover from concussions. And I know that we talked a bit, Ms. Fortier talked about the supports after post-career, but his recommendation was to basically there should be some compensation for concussion injuries, which may be lifelong, and that we as a government should legislate that teams in these leagues should cover lifetime costs of care for post-concussion brain damage. You mentioned some other supports that you have for retired hockey players, but what about compensation for people who are suffering?
Certainly in the United States, if you're suffering a workers-related injury, there's workers' compensation, and other insurance programs like that. And actually, under the settlement we just did resolving the concussion litigation, players who want to get tested can be tested to see if they have any sort of cognitive impairment.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. And we're going to be moving over to...
And excuse me, one other thing, there's also career-ending disability insurance, and our players have, for the most part, guaranteed contracts.
Excellent. Thank you.
the Liberals and Dr. Olfson.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bettman, for coming. I'm an emergency physician. I practiced for 20 years. I'm familiar with head injuries in sporting and non-sporting events. You know, I've seen injuries in football, rugby, soccer, hockey. But hockey is the only sport I've seen where, we're getting back to this issue, where fighting is, at the very least, tolerated. It's against the rules, but it's still tolerated. And Mr. Fisher made a very good point that younger players do like to emulate older players. We had testimony from some younger players that say that they do feel that you know, they some of them aspire to be pro hockey players, and that, you know, it's against the rules, but they still, some of them have been victims of this violence. Now, you say we're at an all-time low for fighting, that it's 85% fight free. Myself, I would say that 15% have fighting, and that's 15% too much. This is an act that is a criminal act in any other in any other setting, with perhaps the exception of the fighting sports like boxing. This could be removed from NHL hockey with the stroke of a pen.
With respect, it couldn't be removed with the stroke of a pen because it would have to be agreed to by the players.
No, sir. The players, sir, don't make the rules. I have never played I've played a number of sports. I've never had a sport where, as a player, I had any say in the rules. Other forms of hockey, like Olympic hockey, you don't see fighting. The NHL could make these rules that completely remove fighting from hockey. Completely.
Actually,
so why don't you?
With all due respect, under the federal labor laws, particularly in the United States, the rules of our game are mandatory subjects of collective bargaining. Mm-hmm. And with respect to the elimination, you know, it's interesting to say we tolerate it, but it's a penalty. The answer is it is penalized. And the question you would have to ask is, what would be the consequence of that act?
I'm going to have to cut you off because I have very little time here. But you said that the threat of fighting deters other kinds of injuries, and what is that based on? Is there empirical evidence?
It's what the players tell us, and in
it's
fact,
what they tell you. But is there any empirical?
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you in a second.
Evidence?
Well, I'm not sure how you would study that, but in a poll that they did about 4 or 5 years ago with the players, 98% of the players who were polled, which was I think roughly half of the players who play in the NHL, said that they did not want to see a change in the fighting rules.
Well, I understand that. What I'm saying is whether or not, I mean, again, we're going on an assumption that, you know, what they're saying is true, that this deters it. I could tell you, I could bring you probably several thousand people who don't believe in vaccination, because they will all tell you that vaccination gives their children autism, when science tells us that's not true. So the fact that players are saying that doesn't make it true.
Thank you, Dr. Olson. Thank you. And Commissioner Bettman, thank you. Now, Commissioner Bettman, I do have a request. As you know, hockey is near and dear to all Canadians' hearts. And from coast to coast to coast, as I understand right now, this is being captured live on CBC. So if you would indulge the committee for a number of more minutes for questions, 10, 15 more extra minutes. Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner. And that moves us over to Dr. Kitchen once again.
Can I just answer that question now that we've agreed to go a little bit longer?
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay. You're asking, honored member, that we prove a negative, and the fact of the matter is we have 700 plus players a year who earn their livelihood playing in the NHL, and they have a great deal to say about how the game should be played. It's not something that we can do unilaterally, but the threat of other types of contact without the threat of fighting, as people who believe it's an important thermostat in the game, is, would you rather see in an emotional moment a cross-check to the head or an elbow to the head or a hit from behind? The threat of fighting makes it clear that a level of conduct that is expected should be complied with. And there's only so much that we can do with supplemental discipline and penalties because, as I said, overwhelmingly, you have 50,000 roughly man games played in the course of a season, not including the playoffs. The incidence of fighting, the incidence of inappropriate conduct is really a tiny, tiny part of the game.
Thank you, Dr. Olson. We'll have a chance. Now we're just moving over to Dr. Kitchen, the Conservatives. Yeah.
Chair, and thanks again. You mentioned, and I agree with you, that your referees are, I mean, it's a thankless job, and it's the toughest job that they ever have. And in my years of coaching, and I coached up to midget AA, and ultimately, when my son became a referee, my respect for referees changed immensely. And my attitude on the bench changed immensely.
They got right a lot more.
Very much so, to understand how it was. So one of the things we've heard earlier is that from Mr. Stringer, and I'm not sure if you're aware of Mr. Stringer, but his daughter Rowan, and in Ontario here we have Rowan's Law, and it was his daughter who died, unfortunately, during from a concussion after playing rugby. And one of the things that Mr. Stringer mentioned was that during that rugby game when he was here, he said that the referee, when a certain individual was actually injured or a high tackle, the referee let it go and did not suspend the person and throw them out of the game, which the rules call for. And then that same individual did the same type of high tackle to his daughter. Now, my question really is, that's a big challenging thing for a referee to do that during a game, and it's a momentary thing that does happen. But in the NHL, we see referees again who will make calls or miss calls, and I guess my question to you is, what steps are you taking to ensure that when they're missed, that the referees are accountable for those actions and follow through with that? So if there's a hit to the head, that referee is whatever it may be, admonished, fined, or whatever it may be, such that there's protection for those players?
All of our games are monitored out of a centralized facility in Toronto, and every call and non-call an official makes is being logged, and they are being constantly reviewed and critiqued by supervisors, including a head of officiating. Those that don't perform well don't get to work long. Those that don't perform well don't get to work the playoffs, and those that don't perform well early on in the playoffs don't get to continue working in the playoffs. We have a true merit system on officiating. We hold the officials accountable by their job performance and how much they get to work, and how much they get to work affects their compensation. They are constantly scrutinized. They are constantly being sent videos of their and other officials' performance so that they can study exactly what they should be doing and what they're missing, or getting wrong.
When you
Thank you, Dr. Kitchen. We're moving over to Mr. Maloney from the Liberals.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to thank Ms. Fortier for sharing her time with me. Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner, thank you for being here. I enjoyed your presentation. I only have a few minutes, so I'm going to get right to the point. I'm old enough that I'm sort of in that period between old school and new school. So I've lived through the fighting era. I'm watching the current era. It's a polarized debate. I've always thought that maybe the best solution would be to lock Don Cherry and Ken Dryden in a room and don't let them out until they have a decision on what the rules are going to be. Well, I think a lot of people would. But look, there's no question that you don't need to be a doctor to know that repeated blows to the head, be it from fists or other things, are likely or more likely than not to cause long-term brain damage. So without getting into the fighting issue, one of the biggest problems, one of the evolutions we've seen in the game is equipment. When I was a kid, we wore hockey equipment as a defensive item. Now, and we've heard this discussed many times too, elbow pads, shoulder pads, they're suits of armor. Has there been, I know it's been discussed, but has there been
Yes.
any serious consideration given to changing that and sort of going back?
We actually have reduced them. They got much larger, particularly the shoulder pads and the elbow pads. And we have worked with the Players Association, as we must on these things, to reduce them, and they've been reduced dramatically. Going back to your point on hits to the head, I don't know if you were here when I mentioned it, but the number over the last 5 years of concussions from fighting, based on our video review, has been about 2.6 a season. Any is too many, but in terms of that being a major cause of concussions, that's not it. And we've mandated foam on elbow pads and shoulder pads as well, and we shrank the shoulder pads. And for those who like more scoring, we've also been trying to shrink goalie equipment, which has been less player safety oriented, but more in terms of
I wasn't going to get into that
offense.
because I didn't think that's what we were here to talk about, but I'm happy about that. Yeah. The other thing is, the director of player safety, which the position is titled, the first person to hold that position, I think, was Brendan Shanahan.
Correct.
Who I have to say is from my riding of Etobicoke Lakeshore. Him, Stefan Cantel, and now the current
George Paros
are all people who were not adverse to getting into physical situations. Was that a factor in the decision in appointing these positions?
No, actually, they were particularly well suited to understand what goes on in a game and what is and isn't appropriate. They all knew how to play physically, but they also understood the ins and outs of the game in a way that their filters were quite good when a player was trying to explain something away.
That's precisely why I thought they might have been chosen. Yes. So thank you. That's all the time.
Over to the NDP and Ms. Hardcastle.
Thank you. Okay, I just want to go back and clarify the issue of the concussion protocol. So now, did I understand that correctly? All hits to the head now are treated with kick in the concussion protocol, or are there still some exemptions?
We look for visible signs. So if, for example, you're unconscious, if you clutch your head,
I get it.
If you look dazed, there needs to be something that gives an indication that you need to be evaluated. It's what we call the visible signs of concussion, which everybody's trained on.
Yeah, I just wasn't understanding from previous testimony. I wasn't clear on. No, that's okay. But what? So I guess my question is, we do have enough research now. We're not in a cave, and I respect the candor. You need to keep the core elements of professional hockey, in your opinion. Those core elements, the physical contact, are the essence of NHL hockey, are the essence of this. It's a profit-making sports enterprise. So I understand that, but we know that it's evolving. We're teaching our kids are learning, and there's going to eventually be this gap because there is more research that's coming. So I guess my real question to you is, the NFL has put research dollars into some vanguard research that's being done at the University of Calgary. And I wondered, is that something that the NHL would be interested in conjunction maybe with the Players Association, to get some research that would help move along this evolution, so that essentially what will end up happening as younger players evolve and continue to be fans of the NHL will be dinosaurs, and there will be this gap. So you'll be long gone, Mr. Bettman, I'm sure. With all due respect, it's the legacy, right? The succession planning. Do you see that there's merit to target and focus on some type of research, and what would the advantage be to having a government role?
We do research, but our research is focused on identifying and treating concussions. That's where our expertise is. We're not a medical facility, we're not a scientific facility, but we have the ability to try and understand what in our game causes injuries by collecting data, reviewing the video, using our expertise, educating and sharing that information, and understanding the best way to treat concussions for a long-term recovery. That's where we've spent on player safety, I believe, $44 million, $32 million of which has been spent on our work related to concussions. So while we're not in the business of medical and scientific research, we think using our resources and sharing it with the other sports, the other levels of hockey, we can make a difference in terms of how the game is played and how concussions are treated.
Thank you. Back to the Liberals and Dr. Olofsson.
All right, thank you. I'd like to pick up where we left off. I guess we might have our definitions mixed up, because when we talked about, I go again to this belief that if you have fighting, it might deter other kinds of blows to the head. You're saying I'm asking you to prove a negative. In fact, I'm asking you to prove a positive. That if you have less fighting, you're going to have more blows to the head.
We have less fighting and we have less blows to the head.
But how does this compare with forms of hockey where you don't have any fighting? Are you saying there's more concussions or more head injuries and concussions in Olympic hockey?
We have of the other North American leagues, we have less fighting. The lowest incidence of fighting of all the other North American leagues.
And
by the way, let's move aside from the 85%. The fact is that fighting over the last 4 years is down 54% from what it was, and fighting continues to evolve out of the game from where it was.
Okay, it's evolving out, and that is good. I'm glad to hear that. The fact that again, it's still there, and
yes, it
I'd
is.
like to offer a contrary opinion by a player when you said that players want fighting. This is hardly unanimous among players. Nick Boynton, he wrote a piece called "Everything's Not Okay." You're probably familiar with it.
Yes.
And he said, and I quote, because there's a dangerous culture in the league that leaves players open to brain damage, mental illness, substance abuse. And he connected many of these issues to head trauma suffered in fights. How do you respond to that? How do you respond to a player that says that, who's
they're on this whole topic, and as this dialogue is making clear, there's no shortage of opinions on this subject. So the good news from your standpoint is that as the game has evolved to a skill game, and we don't have the bench clearing brawls of decades ago, and we don't have third man in, and there's an instigator rule that precedes me, and there's less and less fighting than we've been, not because of some edict, but because of the way the game is now being played. That is a more organic way of dealing with the evolution of the game. But whether it's the OHL, the WHL, the QMJHL, the USHL, the AHL, the ECHL, we have less incidents of fighting than any of those leagues. So if you're looking for us to be setting an example, the fact of the matter is we have less fighting.
Well, you should have none. Quite frankly, it is still dangerous.
But you and I don't know the consequences of that. And when they polled the players a few years ago, 98% of the players they polled said they didn't want the rule changed. And in fact, there have been a number of...
If I may interrupt, because I'm running out of time. Thank you.
We're moving over to the Conservatives and Dr. Kitchen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And
This is the lightning round.
And appreciate it. I can actually, my next question to you, for Prun, I was asked you earlier about referees, was to deal with the issues of consistency.
Yeah.
And oftentimes consistency makes a huge difference in how players react and how coaches, et cetera, react to things. And I'm just wondering how you might respond onto what steps do you take when you see something that appears to be retaliatory? So I was involved at McGill University playing rugby. The women's rugby team there that I helped out, they had memories that remembered the last time they played a person, and they would bring it out right like that. But hockey players are the same way, and they remember things. And so, for example, just recently there was a game where there was a hit to the head. The player was out for 3 games. There was a suspension. That person came back and then retaliated with a fight. And the suspension that he got was not even close to what was done in the initial. And I'm just wondering, how do we keep that consistency, and especially when minor leagues are looking to seeing what the NHL is doing?
The beauty of having the resources we have and the Department of Player Safety, led by former players, they know everything that's going on in the game. And if there's an act that transcends the rules that we believe is an act of retaliation, it gets dealt with appropriately. And if we suspect, because of public statements or whatever, that there's going to be an act of retaliation, the clubs and the players are warned in advance. So that is absolutely critical to us monitoring everything that's going on in the game. With respect to fighting, nobody has to fight. Okay, the game is also evolved in that way. If you decide you don't want to fight, you can walk away from a fight. You don't have to do it. And if, in fact, somebody tries to fight you and you're not fighting back, there's a penalty for that, and the officials take care of it. So I would say probably 75 or 76% of our players never engage in a fight. To the extent that do, maybe it's one fight a season. So the involvement in lots of players having lots of fight, that's from a different bygone era. And the culture is now, if you choose not to fight, you don't have to.
30 seconds.
But
So
that's okay.
Okay, so we're going to move over to Ms. Hardcastle from the NDP for 3 minutes.
Okay. Okay, so you really believe that I guess there's going to be this organic reduction in fighting, and this is going to be okay without any rule changes? At what point do you think that some rule changes are going to have to be established, like a new framework?
We're constantly monitoring and evolving. We meet with the general managers on a regular basis to go over what's taking place in the game. Because we're watching every game, we're looking at trends. But the organic change that we've seen is you don't see staged fights anymore. Mm-hmm. Okay? We actually proposed a rule a number of years ago to get rid of staged fights, and the Players Association said no. But it evolved out of the game because as we moved the game to skill, and teams decided it was more important to have 4 skilled lines than to have a designated tough guy, the amount of fighting came down. The type of fighting you see now, for the most part, is an emotional, in-the-moment act. Somebody's upset, aggravated about something. We have a very fast-paced, emotional game with a lot of physical contact. That is an outlet that is probably better than some other outlets. But again, it has become an increasingly less important part of the game.
Mm-hmm. And how often do you review the science and the research and a concussion protocol? Because I noticed you mentioned, you referenced the Berlin Consensus, but it actually, the research is actually there and more understood. And I think the protocol that you're using isn't as up to date as the Berlin protocol. Do you have a committee?
We have a concussion subcommittee, meets 4 times a year. We have outside experts who are retained. I think there were 36 experts, medicine scientific, who signed on to the Berlin statement, the consensus statement. We probably have 3 or 4 or 5 people involved in that. Obviously, we don't control it, but we're involved, and we're constantly looking and evaluating and reevaluating how it's all working.
Thank you. This moves us to our last questioner. It's MP Maloney from the Liberals.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, I'll try to be quick again. Look, this fighting debate from where I sit, it's an evolution. You've got, it's part fan interest and part medical. I mean, there's fans that still like fighting in the game. Players agree with what you've said, that it's a mechanism to control other issues on the ice. Doug Gilmour was once quoted as saying, if you ban fighting, I'll be the toughest guy in the NHL. That's the mentality of the players. But let's move on from that. So I just want to pick up on the equipment issue. Do you think that there are further changes that could be made to improve the equipment that would reduce the number of head injuries? And then my second question, and I'll leave the floor to you, is forget about collective bargaining. The two of you get to decide what happens. What changes would you make to the game to improve it in a way that would reduce the number of concussions and head-related injuries?
We have also a subcommittee on protective equipment, and that meets on a regular basis, and that's something we're constantly evaluating. I know a lot of people talk about head helmets. Concussions and helmets, two different things, because the concussion is what happens inside. The helmet keeps you from getting a cracked skull, but it doesn't necessarily stop a concussion. But we have subcommittees that meet on a regular basis to deal and look at equipment and what changes are appropriate, and that's something that we continue. All of these things that relate to the game, they're not one-offs. This is a constant effort where personnel, time, energy, money is spent to continuously evaluate what's going on in the game and to make the best judgments for the game.
And my second question is, what would you do, you and the deputy commissioner, if you had carte blanche to make any changes to the game right now?
I like the way the game's being played right now.
That would improve it in a way that would reduce the number of head injuries.
Right now, I don't believe there's much we could do. Just to give you an indication on this, I was on a campaign to get visors. Eyes don't heal particularly well, and they also reduce the incidence of fighting. It took me 20 years to get the Players Association to agree to put visors on.
Yeah, and they were grandfathered in when they were. No.
Well, but now virtually 95% of our players
I see the
are
lights
wearing them.
I just, on behalf of the committee, I want to thank Commissioner Bettman, Deputy Commissioner Daly. You've been good sports about all of this, and we understand that you're in the midst of playoff season. We had hoped that some Canadian teams would be part of that playoff mix, but as we work towards the Stanley Cup, what we're doing here on this committee, this subcommittee of health, sport-related concussions, we are going to be able to put a report together with our analysts, our clerk, and that report will be tabled in Parliament before the end of this session. We thank you for your input, for your testimony, and for the materials that you've provided us on behalf of the NHL. Thank you, Commissioner Bettman.
Thank you for having us. It's been an honor to be here.
That concludes our meeting.